Dead America. Tales of the First Month. Red Eye. Chapter 1. Day 0. At 5:15 a.m. Central Standard Time, the interior of the small charter jet was a hushed sanctuary, the soft hum of the engines providing a constant backdrop. Pilot Nate Reynolds guided the plane through the enveloping darkness toward Chicago. For Nate, flights like these, long-haul stretches from far-flung corners of the world like southern Italy, were more of a privilege than a chore. The sleep deprivation that came with the red-eye flights was a paltry toll for the grandeur of seeing the world without footing the bill. Glancing back into the cabin, his eyes strayed towards Sasha, a young woman whose radiance had captured his attention earlier. Behind her, Marcus, an older doctor, was in a state of repose, almost a sculpture of a man in deep slumber since crossing the Atlantic. Adjacent to him were Tabitha and Liam, each engrossed in their respective worlds. One fictional, one scientific, bound by the pages of their books. Yet, as Nate's gaze lingered perhaps a second too long on Sasha, he became acutely aware of another pair of eyes on him. Veronica, a woman in her 50s, impeccably dressed in a power suit, was casting him a reproachful stare. "Shouldn't you be focused on what's in front of you?" Veronica murmured, low enough to ensure privacy but loud enough to reach his ears. "Ma'am, with all due respect, it's 5 a.m. in the flatlands of America. There's nothing at this altitude except for us," Nate retorted, turning his attention back to the cockpit, leaving Veronica with a half-smile, half-smirk on her face. Veronica then shifted her gaze to Sasha, who was engrossed in her computer screen. Photographs of gastronomic delights, each captured in multiple angles, danced across her screen. Caught in the act of staring, much like Nate, Veronica was taken aback when Sasha finally noticed her. "Did you want to pick some I should share?" Sasha inquired, grinning playfully. "I am so sorry. I didn't mean to stare. That's just a lot of food pictures. And I got caught racking my brain trying to figure out the reason behind them all," Veronica stammered. "Come up with anything good." "At my age, I've learned not to question the motivations of young people," Veronica replied, clearly amused. Sasha turned her laptop slightly toward Veronica and clicked on a web browser tab, revealing Sasha's culinary conquests. "I'm a menu builder for high-end restaurants, so I travel the globe in search of new recipes for my clients. So I figured why not have some fun and start a food blog as well. A menu builder for high-end restaurants. How in the world do you get into that? Don't think I've ever seen that job advertised," Veronica mused. "Yeah, it's definitely one of those things you just kind of fall into," Sasha began, delving into the serendipitous path that led her from being a chef at a hole-in-the-wall restaurant in Manhattan to a globe-trotting menu builder. "One of my regulars was investing in a new place and offered me a chef job there. I didn't really want to leave my small spot, but I told him I'd be happy to look at his menu and give my feedback. I think I suggested changes on 80% of what he had, and he went with most of them. Once the reviews started coming in, he started sending his restaurant investor buddies my way. And next thing you know, you're jet-setting around the globe?" "Almost. Took about a year of saving up before I could start branching out and expanding my culinary horizons. But after that setup phase, I was established. Had a dozen or so clients who were investing in restaurants all over the country, and I never looked back," Sasha replied. "And the internet fame is just a bonus," Veronica teased. Sasha flashed a radiant smile before her eyes narrowed, spotting something amiss on her laptop screen. "What is it?" Veronica asked, noticing Sasha's sudden change in expression. "Just getting an unusual amount of comments on my latest photo. Been 100 in the last half hour," Sasha said, puzzled. "Maybe you're more popular than you think," Veronica mused. "As much as I'd love to believe that. I posted this a few hours ago. Most of my followers are in the States, so they should be asleep," Sasha retorted. "Still, sounds like a good problem to have," Veronica offered. As long as I didn't get hacked again. Sasha sighed, her fingers dancing over the touchpad as she scrolled through the comments. Each was filled with cryptic links and messages. Warnings, perhaps? Stay in Europe, read one. What is going on? Read another. Finally, her curiosity getting the better of her, Sasha clicked on one of the links. It opened a shaky cell phone video of what seemed to be a riot at a bar. The screen filled with chaotic scenes of brawls, people bleeding and screaming, a sense of pandemonium invading the hitherto tranquil space inside the jet. The tension in the air was palpable as Sasha clicked on another video labeled Chicago Riot. The screen flickered to life, displaying a chaotic scene of confusion and violence. She subtly nudged the volume dial upwards while tapping Veronica on the shoulder to draw her attention to the unfolding chaos on the screen. Both women were transfixed, watching as a similar tableau of mayhem unfolded. The cameraman screaming incoherently at his friend to stop attacking a bartender. The words were lost amid the cacophony, but they didn't need to hear to understand. The bartender had a horrifying chunk of flesh torn from their shoulder. Disturbed, Sasha quickly shut down the video. Seemed unnecessarily violent. Was that a movie? Veronica inquired, an edge of disbelief coloring her words. Sasha shook her head. It was a bar in downtown Chicago. Are there any more like that? Veronica asked, concern stitching her brows closer together. Sasha scrolled through her feed, spotting a pattern. Videos like this were proliferating from major cities, most notably along the East Coast and central parts of the country. What is this? Veronica's voice held a trace of trepidation now. I don't know, Sasha admitted, the words heavy in her mouth. Unbuckling her seatbelt, she leaned towards the cockpit. Hey, Nate, she called. Nate's voice dripped with practiced charm as he responded. How can I help you, Sasha? Have you heard anything from Chicago about trouble? She inquired, her voice tinged with apprehension. His brow furrowed in confusion. What kind of trouble are you concerned about? It's probably nothing, but there are these posts on social media. Videos of violent riots in Chicago, Sasha explained. Nate tried to make light of the situation. Are we sure a local sports team didn't win a big game? Sasha was in no mood for levity. It was in other cities too. Instantly, Nate's demeanor changed. His face tightened and he nodded, snapping back into the role of captain. Okay, we're a couple minutes out from being in range of the O'Hare Tower. If you could keep looking online, that would be helpful. I'll let you know what I hear. I'll get the others working on it as well, Sasha promised as she returned to the small cabin area. Pausing for a moment to gather herself, she spoke up nervously. Excuse me, if I could have your attention, I know it's either really early or late. I'm not sure which, but there may be a situation. What kind of situation? Liam interjected, his eyes narrowing. Sasha outlined what she'd seen online, her voice growing more urgent. There are videos of riots and extreme violence in some big cities. I'm going to keep looking, but it would be really helpful if you all could look too. Tabitha dismissed her with a wave of her hand. Don't be dramatic. If something were really wrong, don't you think the pilot would heard something? No sooner had she said that than Nate's voice filled the cabin as he tried to contact O'Hare Airport. O'Hare Tower, do you copy? This is flight 3720, coming out of Naples. Do you copy? The ensuing silence was deafening. After a moment that stretched into an eternity, Nate spoke again. O'Hare Tower, do you copy? Is anybody home? The silence persisted, and Nate finally removed his headset, swiveling around to face the cabin. There's no answer at O'Hare. Maybe they're on break. It's late. Can't be that busy, right? Tabitha's words were less confident now. Nate's expression was grave. O'Hare's one of the busiest airports in the world. Something's going on. What about Midway? Liam queried, already scrolling through his phone. Still a few minutes until we're in range. But I'll try them next. In the meantime, I need all of you to look for info, Nate urged, his voice taking on a commanding tone. Liam nodded, and even Tabitha, who had abandoned her condescending tone, took out her phone. And somebody get the doc up, Nate added, concern mounting in his eyes. Obliging, Sasha moved to the back of the small plane. She tapped an older man, Dr. Bennett, on the shoulder, trying to rouse him from his sleep. He stirred like a fussy toddler, but didn't awaken. Growing more urgent, Sasha gave him a firm shake, finally jolting him into consciousness. Huh, what? Are we in Chicago already? Dr. Bennett mumbled, disoriented. Almost, Dr. Bennett. Something's come up, Sasha informed him. We're still on time for Chicago, right? I have a speech to give at a conference at 9, he inquired, still groggy. Settle in, and I'll tell you what's going on, Sasha reassured him, as she updated him on the unsettling turn of events. Meanwhile, Tabitha tried dialing her husband, only to find the lines down. Lines are down, she announced, dread seeping into her voice. Liam, too, had been scrolling through his social media and seeing similar posts to Sasha's. Deciding he'd seen enough, he made his way back to the cockpit. It's Liam, right? Nate asked, looking up as the man entered. Yep, Liam confirmed. Got anything? Nate pressed. More of the same, Liam reported grimly. And what about you? He inquired, sensing the increasing gravity of the situation. Still radio silence from O'Hare, Nate said, his voice tinged with worry. And midway? The question hung in the air, unanswered, leaving a heavy silence that seemed to echo the uncertainty and dread mounting in the small cabin. Same story. Just nobody's home, Nate said, a note of disbelief tainting his voice. So what's the plan? Liam responded, curiosity laced with a hint of urgency. Nate motioned for Liam to climb into the cockpit's second pilot seat. Liam obliged, securing the headphones over his ears as he nestled into the chair. Chicago's going to be on the horizon in a few minutes. I could use a second set of eyes, Nate said, his eyes never leaving the instrument panel. Got you covered, Liam assured him. Just then, the radio burst to life, sending a palpable ripple of excitement through Nate. This is Captain Bradley with Flight 617. Can anybody read me? A voice crackled over the headphones. I got you, Captain, Nate responded, gripping the microphone. Who am I talking to? Captain Bradley inquired. Name's Nate. I'm the pilot of Flight 3720, Nate replied. A pause. Then Captain Bradley came back on, his voice touched by a hint of concern. Well, Nate, I have a question for you, but I don't want you to be alarmed. Have you heard anything from O'Hare? Been trying them for the last 10 minutes and nothing. Nate and Liam exchanged a defeated look, the gravity of their situation deepening. That's a negative, Captain. Same situation at Midway as well. It's like everybody just vanished, Nate finally said, resignation painting his words. Jesus, you heard from any other flights in the area? Captain Bradley asked. Not in the last couple of hours, Nate admitted. There was a weighty pause, the kind that fills a room with tension thick enough to cut. Captain Bradley seemed to be gathering his thoughts, but Nate broke the silence. There's something else. A couple of my passengers have seen reports of rioting in Chicago and elsewhere. I don't have any details outside of that, but something could be going on that's affecting the towers, Nate said, sharing the disquieting news he had. The towers have backups on top of backups, so the odds of both of them going dark at the same time is non-existent, Captain Bradley retorted, trying to reason through the situation. Well, the towers themselves might be hot, but it doesn't matter if nobody's there, Nate countered. For a moment, Captain Bradley sat in silence, recognizing the unsettling truth in Nate's words. Regardless of the reason, I have 150 souls on board who are expecting to land safe and sound. So I'm going to divert to Milwaukee and hope someone showed up to work today, Captain Bradley finally declared. We're going to be in view of Chicago here momentarily, and with any luck, be on the ground shortly thereafter. If I have good news, I'll be in touch. Nate responded, a touch of camaraderie filling the airwaves. Appreciate it, Nate, said Captain Bradley. My pleasure, Captain. Good luck, Nate concluded as the radio line fell silent. Liam looked at Nate, his eyes narrowing. Well, that wasn't encouraging, he said. Could be worse. At least we're not in his shoes, Nate replied. What do you mean? Liam asked. Nate began to explain. Depending on his fuel, he only has 3 or 4 airports that he can possibly land at due to the size of his plane. At least we have options if... He trailed off, catching Liam's increasingly worried expression. Let's just hope it doesn't come to that, Nate said, attempting to offer some comfort. Liam glanced back into the cabin. The passengers, glued to their phones and Sasha engrossed in her laptop, wore faces void of optimism. Before Liam could ponder further, Nate tapped him on the shoulder, redirecting his gaze forward. Mother of God, Liam muttered. Took the words right out of my mouth, Nate said, equally stunned. What they saw in the dark distance as they approached Chicago was nothing short of terrifying. The skyline erupted in sporadic fires, none of them in office buildings, but still far more than there should ever be. What the hell is going on? Liam asked, his voice tinged with horror. Whatever it is, let's just hope it hasn't affected the airport, Nate responded, a grim resolve setting in. They continued to stare out of the cockpit windows, their breaths shallow, their thoughts heavy. As they neared the airport, tension wrapped around them like a suffocating shroud. Liam noticed Nate's furrowed brow and eyes filled with concern. You all right? Liam asked. Nate snapped back to reality, his voice tinged with disbelief. Yeah, it's just, the airport is just wrong. We're not even there yet, Liam interjected. Yeah, but look, there's no other planes, nobody landing, nobody taking off. Just nothing. I know it's not prime time for traffic yet, but there should at least be something, Nate insisted. Liam felt a chilling dread seep into him, further solidifying the dire reality they were facing. Both pilots fell into an anxious silence as they approached the airport, the unease heightening when they noticed a large fire erupting from the runway area. Flying over the airport, Nate slowed the aircraft, descending low enough to get a proper view. Below them was a jumbo jet, horribly askew on the runway, one wing detached and ablaze. Where are the emergency vehicles? Nate questioned, his voice thick with worry. Liam peered closer, his eyes squinting to discern the chaotic shapes below. Not only that, are those people? Amidst the flickering firelight and scarce moonlight, they saw unmistakable human figures sprinting haphazardly across the runway. Some appeared to be fleeing, while others seemed to be in pursuit. The terrifying scene crystallized as they watched individuals being tackled and brought down. I think it's safe to say that we're not going to be landing there. Liam finally broke the silence. While that's true, we're going to be landing somewhere in the next hour and a half or so, Nate said, his voice thick with foreboding. He pointed to the fuel gauge, hovering perilously above empty. Fear cascaded across Liam's face, but Nate tried to offer reassurance. Don't worry, I'll get us far away from here, and I'm a hell of a pilot, so I'll get us to the ground safely. Just need to figure out where that is. Before Liam could respond, an excited shout echoed from the back of the plane. Guys, I got something, Sasha yelled. Go, I got it up here. I'm going to start heading south and we'll figure it out, Nate said, nodding at Liam, who promptly vacated the co-pilot seat to join the passengers crowding around Sasha's laptop. On the screen was a disheveled man, obviously an improvised news anchor, fumbling with an earpiece amidst the chaos of the newsroom. The atmosphere was tense as a young newscaster. His face flushed with a mix of excitement and apprehension, broke into the regular television programming. "Okay, everybody. I'm sorry for interrupting your show, but there is a situation happening in Chicago that everyone needs to be made aware of." He fumbled with his papers, searching for the correct script. Finding it, he proceeded to read. "There have been numerous reports of violent outbreaks throughout the city overnight. We have reached out to the police and emergency management services, and they are not commenting on the specifics of what is going on. However, they are encouraging people to stay indoors if they can. Lock your doors. Stay away from your windows, and under no circumstances should you open your door for anyone." His gaze drifted off camera where a producer was urgently signaling something to him. It took him a moment to grasp the significance. Finally nodding, he refocused on the camera. "Okay, I'm sorry folks, but news is coming in every minute. We've just been informed that someone from the mayor's office will be holding a press conference within the next hour and will provide updates. In the meantime, stay safe. We will bring you updates as we get them." Sasha, whose finger had been hovering over the remote, hit the mute button and turned to her companions. "Doesn't look like Chicago is a safe place to be." "That's unacceptable," Dr. Bennett protested, a hint of irritation coloring his tone. "I have a conference to attend. This is just people overreacting to some teenagers acting out." Tabitha quickly tapped on her phone and spun it around for Dr. Bennett to see. "Is this really what you want us to go into, just so you can get to your precious conference?" On the screen was a horrific scene. A man, similar in build and age to Dr. Bennett, was attempting to escape from monstrous creatures. His efforts were futile, and his screams echoed as they pounced on him. Dr. Bennett watched, his face turning a shade paler. "Okay, maybe Chicago isn't the best idea." Veronica leaned forward, her voice tinged with urgency. "But if we're not going to Chicago, then where are we going?" "That's what we need to figure out," Liam added, the weight of the decision hanging heavy in the air. Nate broke in. "See if you can pull up a map. I'm headed south and need someplace within 150 miles or so of Chicago." Obediently, Sasha accessed an online map, scanning for mid-sized cities to the south. After a few calculations, she made her recommendation. "Go to Bloomington. It's about 130 miles. Give or take. And it has a decent-sized airport, at least from the satellite view." Nate nodded. "Okay. Click on the airport and write down the coordinates for me." Sasha did as instructed, jotting down a series of numbers on a piece of paper and handing it to Liam, who promptly took it up to the cockpit. "Perfect. Okay, everybody get comfortable. We'll be on the ground in 90 minutes or so." Each individual took their seat, silence enveloping them. Their faces were masks of disbelief, a cloud of uncertainty overshadowing the group as they processed the apocalyptic situation they were suddenly thrust into. Chapter 2. An hour of almost unbearable silence stretched inside the jet, each passenger tethered to their digital screens. It was as if an invisible force field of tension held them captive, each lost in the chaotic dance of pixels on their phones and laptops. News feeds were barren lands, devoid of any meaningful updates save for the same looped newscast and a smattering of frantic cell phone videos. Finally, Tabitha, unable to stomach the helplessness any longer, tossed her phone onto the drink tray with a huff. "This is hopeless. Nobody knows what the hell is going on out there," she declared, her frustration palpable. Sasha glanced up from her screen, her eyes narrowed with a resolve that was difficult to maintain. "Just keep looking." Tabitha's face wrinkled in disbelief. "What's the point?" "The point is that something horrific is going on out there, and we're about to be in the middle of it. And I don't know about you, but I'd like to try and find something that tells us what's happening, no matter how unlikely it is." Tabitha hesitated, chewing on Sasha's words. She finally nodded and picked up her phone again, her fingers darting across the screen as if hoping to uncover some hidden kernel of truth. Meanwhile, up front, Nate swiveled his chair, glancing over his shoulder toward the main cabin. Liam, need you up here. Liam pocketed his cell phone, extricating himself from his seat with a sense of urgency. He moved toward the cockpit and settled into the co-pilot's chair. How we doing? He asked. One way or another, we're going to be on the ground in 15 minutes, Nate responded, his voice tinged with gravity. Know where we're landing yet. Just about to do a flyby of the Bloomington airport. Need another set of eyes on the situation below. Nate squinted out the window at the horizon, a ribbon of darkness where the earth met the sky. There should have been a glimmer of dawn by now, but all that met his eyes was impenetrable blackness. Shouldn't the sun be up by now? Liam observed, a tremor of concern in his voice. Nate chuckled, checking his wristwatch. Sun will be up soon, right about the time we touch down. Liam managed a humorless laugh, shaking his head. Yeah, that does seem to be how the day is going. At least we're not on that jumbo jet. Thank God for small miracles. Nate picked up the radio receiver, pausing as if weighing the words he was about to say. Let's roll the dice one more time, shall we? Liam nodded, and Nate pressed the call button. Bloomington Tower. Do you copy? Static. Nothing but a void of white noise answered him. Bloomington Tower. Do you copy? We are an inbound charter jet, and we need clearance for landing. Still, no response. Nate's fingers slipped from the receiver as he returned it to its cradle. His eyes danced across the gauges before landing on a handwritten sheet filled with coordinates. We're only a few miles out from town. We should be seeing something soon. As the plane drew closer, both men squinted through the cockpit window, desperate to make out the shapes of a town etched in the obsidian horizon. Guess it's a good sign that everything's not on fire, Liam commented dryly. Look at that. Our luck's changing already, Nate replied, a tinge of irony coloring his words. A few moments later, the faint glow of airport lights flickered in the distance. Got 'em right there, Liam pointed, and Nate adjusted the plane's course accordingly. As they drew closer, the outlines of buildings in downtown Bloomington emerged, rising like silhouettes against the dark backdrop. That's not exactly what I was envisioning when I heard small town, Liam noted. Yeah, I was kind of hoping for a private airstrip in a farming community, Nate replied, a trace of regret in his voice. So what do we do? Nate pulled up on the stick, gaining altitude. Going to do a flyby and see what we can see. Wouldn't being lower help? The higher we are, the less noise that makes it to the ground. Based on what I've been hearing from you guys, keeping our location a mystery might be a good thing, Nate reasoned. Liam thought about the grisly images he'd seen on his phone and nodded. So anything specific I should be looking for? Your guess is as good as mine. Just anything that doesn't look normal. As they hovered over Bloomington, the two men peered out of the side windows, scanning the terrain below. In the lingering darkness, the red and white glows of taillights and building lights appeared like distant fireflies. I see car lights, but it doesn't look like anything is moving, Liam reported. I got some movement over here, Nate said, spotting a car that was speeding down a residential street, zigzagging as though navigating through an obstacle course. The vehicle careened into a telephone pole and flipped over. Moments later, whatever illumination it offered was snuffed out by an indistinct shape. Nate's face tightened. Not the kind of movement we want to see. Nope, Liam agreed, just as the fuel warning light began to blink. Shit, Nate muttered. It's the 10-minute warning signal that we're about to be on the ground, he explained to Liam, who was now visibly on edge. So what do we do? Nate pondered momentarily, then raised his voice to address the passengers in the cabin. Okay, listen up. We got two options, and we're putting it to a vote. Now we can't confirm that what's happening in Chicago is going on down there in Bloomington. But the tower is silent, and there are some signs of trouble that we've been able to spot. Dr. Bennett interjected. Then let's go somewhere else. Wish we could, but we're going to be on the ground in the next 10 minutes because we're out of fuel, Nate answered, cutting off a rising murmur of concern from the other passengers. So what are our options? Tabitha queried, the tension evident in her voice. Well, on the flyby of the airport, I saw that the runway was clear. So we can land there, Nate began, his eyes scanning the group. However, it's going to cause a lot of noise, which might be bad depending on what's out there. Sasha leaned forward from her seat. And the other option? We fly out into the country as far as we can and land in a field, away from everything, Nate replied, as his fingers drummed nervously on the control panel. Veronica, who'd been listening intently, broke in. Why is it even a debate? Because it's not going to be light outside before we land, Nate explained, which means I won't be able to see where I'm landing. Now there's a lot of flat farmland out here, but if the ground's soft or there's a lake or farm equipment or anything like that, I won't be able to see it until it's too late. Even if I had daylight, it would be 50-50 on whether or not I could get us down without issue. Liam, sitting across from Veronica, chimed in. Plus, we have to assume that no help is coming should we crash. So that's where we are, Nate summed up, his voice tinged with a grim resolve. We can safely land in what is most likely a dangerous situation, or we can roll the dice and hope we don't end up dying in a field in the middle of Illinois. The passengers exchanged concerned glances, the weight of their collective decision settling around them like a heavy fog. A minute passed in uneasy silence, no one willing to break it, each lost in their thoughts. Finally, Nate gave them an ultimatum. We don't have time for a lengthy debate. So show of hands. Who wants to land at the airport? Slowly, cautiously, Sasha, Dr. Bennett, and Veronica raised their hands. Nate looked over at Liam, who, along with Tabitha, kept his hand down. 3-2. Looks like we're going to the airport, Nate announced, his voice carrying a sense of finality. Now look, everyone. There is no contact with the tower, so when we land, we're going to be on our own. So what do we do? Liam asked, a tone of urgency breaking through. If something is going on out there, we can't stay in the plane, Nate stated. Matter-of-factly, we get out, find the nearest building that looks like it can be secured, and get to it. Everybody good with that plan? The passengers, absorbing the gravity of Nate's words, nodded in agreement. With a sense of finality, Nate quickly turned around and fastened his seatbelt. Liam followed suit, turning back to the others and motioning for them to do the same. As they each clicked their belts into place, the plane's engines roared louder, a haunting echo of the uncertainty that lay ahead. Nate grabbed the radio receiver one last time. Attention, Bloomington Tower. We are out of fuel and are coming in for a landing. If anybody is there, please advise us on where to go. Again, we are out of fuel and coming in for a landing. We will be on the ground in the next couple of minutes. Putting the receiver back in its holder, he shifted his gaze to Liam, who had turned an unsettling shade of pale. Don't worry, I'll get us on the ground, Nate assured him. That's actually what I'm afraid of, Liam whispered, his eyes locked onto the approaching runway. Just then, Nate noticed something unsettling in the shadows of the infield. He kept his focus on landing, but Liam, peering out the window, sensed the lurking danger. Nate, the infield, Liam warned, his voice tinged with urgency. I know, Nate replied, unflinching as he guided the plane towards the ground. The wheels touched down, and almost immediately, the sensation of impact reverberated through the cabin, something forceful smacking against the wheels. Nate grappled with the controls, doing his best to steer the lurching aircraft. More loud thuds rang out, and then the plane's back right tire seized. It was all Nate could do to keep the plane from flipping as it careened off the runway, tearing through the grass and dirt of the infield before finally coming to a jarring halt. Both men sat there, panting, eyes wide with the realization of their narrow escape. Any landing you can walk away from is a good one, right?" Liam quipped, somehow finding humor amid the chaos. Nate chuckled softly, unbuckling his seatbelt to join the passengers in the back of the plane. As he moved, he noticed Tabitha already at the door, ready to swing it open. Before he could utter a word of caution, the door was ajar. "Watch yourself!" Nate shouted. Startled, Tabitha turned her attention away from the door, just as a blood-soaked creature lunged at her. With one violent motion, it grabbed her and sank its teeth into her neck. Her scream, unnervingly cut off by a guttural gurgle, spread panic through the remaining passengers. Jolted from his stupor by the impending threat, Nate saw more of these monstrosities climbing up the stairs of the plane. With a quick, determined shove, he sent Tabitha and her attacker tumbling out of the plane. "We're not getting out this way," Nate yelled, grabbing an emergency fire extinguisher from its wall mount, readying it to strike at the next creature who was on its way up the stairs. Liam sprang into action, rushing past Nate and towards the emergency exit over the wing. He peered out, taking stock of their perilous situation. "What are you waiting for?" Sasha barked, her voice laced with panic. "Gotta wait for them to get to the other side of the plane," Liam explained. "What? Why?" Sasha shot back. "Because when this thing pops, it's going to get their attention, which means we're going to have to haul ass," Liam retorted. Dr. Bennett, his eyes wide at the 8-foot drop from the wing, questioned, "How are we getting down?" "Gonna have to jump," Liam declared. "This is going to hurt," Dr. Bennett mumbled, clearly uncomfortable with the idea, but more concerned about the immediate danger that Nate was facing. A ghoulish figure at the top of the stairs, inching closer. Liam's eyes narrowed as he watched the last loathsome creature skitter beneath the belly of the plane. With a swift motion, he popped open the hatch, gripping the small door as if it were a makeshift shield. No sooner had his boots hit the wing than he was sprinting across its expanse. He leaped off, a human projectile, landing with a jarring impact that sent him stumbling forward. He regained his footing and quickly composed himself. Whirling around, he eyed the plane's cabin as his companions began to spill out. He hefted the small door, bracing himself for the inevitable. Almost on cue, a creature darted out from beneath the plane and charged toward him. Liam's adrenaline spiked. He rushed forward to meet the grotesque thing, wielding his makeshift shield like a battering ram. The collision was thunderous. The creature was lifted clean off its feet and slammed onto the ground with bone-crushing force. Without a second's pause, Liam brought down the sharp edge of the door onto the creature's face. Once, twice, 3 times. The third blow left the monster's forehead caved in, its form twitching in violent spasms on the ground. Liam lifted his eyes just in time to see Sasha and Veronica already on the tarmac, steadying Dr. Bennett as he gingerly made his way down from the wing. The group exchanged brief, urgent glances before bolting toward a distant hangar, the only semblance of sanctuary in sight. Liam risked a glance over his shoulder, his eyes widening as he saw Nate burst out of the cabin. With adrenaline pumping through his veins, Nate sprinted across the plane's wing. At the edge, he leapt, rolling as he hit the ground, but immediately popping back up in an almost fluid motion, his sprint resuming as if uninterrupted. Yet Nate wasn't the sole figure to emerge from the plane. Hot on his heels, a half-dozen grotesque creatures scrambled out the cabin door, their forms a nightmare of gnarled flesh and twisted limbs. They too made for the wing and launched themselves off. But unlike the agile pilot, their landings were anything but graceful. They tumbled and sprawled, their disarray providing the fleeing humans with a few precious stolen seconds. Up ahead, their destination loomed, a building still a daunting couple of 100 yards away. But as Liam's eyes darted from side to side, he realized with a sinking feeling that the situation was deteriorating fast. Creatures were converging on them, not just from behind, but from all directions, their numbers growing like a dark tide. "We're not gonna make it," Liam panted. Just when hope seemed to ebb away entirely, the faint wail of a siren cut through the air. Liam's head snapped to the left, eyes locking onto a fire truck barreling toward them. Its lights were a frantic dance of red and white, its siren a clarion call that diverted the monster's attention. The truck plowed through the horde, flinging bodies into the air and grinding others beneath its massive wheels. The group veered off course, sprinting toward the oncoming vehicle while waving their arms frantically. Two horn honks from the truck signaled they had been seen. With one final, calculated swerve, the fire truck mowed down the last standing creatures that had been hot on their trail. It screeched to a halt just ahead of them. A young face, barely 17, peered out from the driver's window, locking eyes with the panting survivors. "Get on, Johnny!" the young driver shouted. The group moved with a sense of urgency, propelled by adrenaline and the wail of the monstrous creatures that pursued them. As the truck roared to life, teenagers rushed to help the women and Doc climb into the cab, their faces tinged with relief and fatigue. Liam and Nate, gripping the side of the truck with white-knuckled determination, felt the wind rush past them as the vehicle sped down the runway, leaving behind nothing but a trail of dust and the frustrated screeches of their pursuers. The drive was short, but seemed to stretch on infinitely. The truck weaved through the deserted tarmac, finally stopping on the other side of the airport at a small, fenced-in rescue station. The sight that greeted them was grim. Several corpses lay outside the fence, a gruesome testament to the chaos that had unfolded. Survivors quickly opened the gate and the truck pulled in. The moment it came to a halt, everyone disembarked, eager to put solid ground beneath their feet. Johnny, a teenager, approached Liam and Nate. "Thank you," Liam muttered, his voice tinged with relief. "My pleasure." "One of you guys the pilot?" Johnny asked, glancing between them. Liam pointed to Nate, who raised his hand in acknowledgement. "That'd be me. I'm Nate." "Johnny, welcome to the shit show," Johnny said, his eyes weary but focused. "What's going on?" Liam inquired, the question hanging in the air like an ominous cloud. Shaking his head, Johnny motioned for them to follow him inside the building. As they entered, they saw a dozen high school-age students scattered throughout the space. A young woman was attentively wrapping a wound on someone's arm, while others huddled in corners, scrolling through their phones in a futile search for information. "We were on our way to school when our driver hit someone. He got out. And, well, Johnny trailed off, swallowing hard as he collected himself. My uncle works here, and I thought he might be able to help, so I drove us here. Nobody was home, though. Didn't know what else to do, so we just locked the place down and tried to stay quiet, at least until you showed up." "How'd you know we were coming?" Nate questioned, his brows furrowing. "Their radio system is tied into the tower feed. My uncle said it was so that if something was going wrong, they'd know about it. Figured you might need a hand," Johnny explained. "You figured right," Liam affirmed, his eyes meeting Johnny's in a silent understanding of their shared predicament. "So what do we do now?" Johnny asked, his voice tinged with desperation. Liam and Nate exchanged a helpless glance, aware that the room full of anxious teenagers was looking to them for guidance. "Is there food?" Nate finally broke the silence. "Plenty of food and water," Johnny replied, nodding. "Then we lock this place down and sit tight. At least until we know what's happening," Nate concluded. His answer seemed to drain the room of hope. The teenagers shuffled away, disappointment clouding their faces. Even Johnny appeared let down as he retreated towards the kitchen. "I'll be back in a minute. Gonna get you some food," he said, his voice heavy with unspoken emotions. Both Liam and Nate felt the weight of their new reality settling in. Outside, a deadly unknown, and inside, a room full of terrified teenagers all looking to them for answers. Finally, Nate took charge. Climbing onto the back of the truck to gain height and visibility, he spoke with newfound authority. "Okay, everybody, Listen up. I know you're all scared. We are too. But we're going to get through this together. Right now, we're sitting tight because it's the safest thing to do. While we're here, I need information. He pointed at groups around the room, delegating tasks. You with the phones. I want every bit of information you have. I don't care where it's from. You, stuffing your faces, find me maps of the area. Highlight any place that might be well-stocked and safe. And the rest of you, keep watch outside. We're going to get through this. With that, Nate jumped down and walked away from the gathering, his boots echoing softly on the floor. He stopped by a window at the front of the building and peered out. Zombies meandered near the fence, thankfully oblivious to their presence. Nate sighed deeply, a mix of relief and resignation. His jet-setting lifestyle might have reached a sudden and unforeseen end, but the call to adventure, that at least was very much alive. The end.